I Right. I'm a professor of computer science at the University of Chicago. I've been a professor about 20 years. Um, I got my PhD at Berkeley back in the day, a long time ago. So I'm older than I'm guessing most folks on the call. But my specialty is research in computer security, and I would say I used to work on security systems that protect AI back when the AI was, ethically, non-questionable and clean. But in the last couple of years, I've really sort of spent much of my time building tools that basically disrupt AI and try to mitigate its harms, uh, particularly on human creatives like artists and musicians and writers and so on. So yeah, I'm just going to talk about some of the research recently, and Carl is a big part of that. I would easily say, without hesitation, that I think I would be doing none of this if it were not for Carla and meeting Carla. So Carla is the root of all of this. Yeah.
Amazing. Thank you, Ben. And then with that, we'll start with Carla. Please give everyone a little bit about you, your background, maybe a little around CAA as well.
Sure. What's a round CA?
Sorry, around the Concept Art Society.
Oh, okay. Sorry. Hi. Yeah, my name's Carla. I'm a fine artist, an illustrator, and a concept artist. I've been working in the entertainment industry now for about 15 plus years or so. Um, I think it's easiest to show. Am I able to show? Oh my God, I'm able to show. Look at this. Because I think it's just easier to show the work that I do as a concept artist. Primarily, I've worked in all sorts of projects, Loki season 1, season 2, Black Panther, Guardians of the Galaxy, primarily in my role as a concept artist. But I am most notably known for my work on Doctor Strange. If you guys will give me a second. The first Doctor Strange, as I was the one who basically designed his costume. And it all started with a painting. It all started with a lot of drawing and a lot of painting. And in my free time where there's really not that much, I get to do fine artwork. This painting in particular was in collaboration with the University of Chicago. It is the first lace painting to be done, which is really fun because it's an oil painting, and if you can kind of see it in the back over there. It's the feet. But yeah, I am an educator. Um I've been in the past few years now an advocate for artists, especially in this interesting future that we all share. And I don't know, just chilling.
Thank you so much, Carla. That was a great introduction. And then
Okay.
finally, Dr. Audio.
Um, I was afraid I was going to start speaking while my camera was on mute, but I hope that's not the case. So my name is Adio. I got my PhD from the University of Bremen in Northern Germany. And my focus is, or my specialty is in digital labor. And at the moment, I'm working as a researcher at the Distributed AI Research Institute, where we are doing quite amazing work, even though I say so myself. And one of the projects that I'm working on is the Data Workers Inquiry Project, which I will talk more about in my presentation. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Thank you for joining, even though it's so late / early where you are. I think this is going to be a really wonderful panel, and we'll get started with Dr. Zhao. Would you like to start with your Glazed Nightshade demo?
Okay. So it's not really a demo per se. It's just a short talk. I wanted to talk about some of the challenges. Again, I'm not quite familiar with the audience and how much they're aware of the space. So this is a little bit of a sort of super fast primer on some of the challenges facing artists and what Glaze and Nightshade do. The actual apps themselves are really quite simple, but I can talk to them through them if folks are interested. So give me 1 second. I want to set this up correctly. Okay, that should work. I believe works much better than some of the other goofy things like Microsoft Meetings. All right, so this is something that I think a bunch of these slides Carla has seen, I don't know, God knows how many times. But anyway, like I said very briefly, I'm a professor at University of Chicago. Yeah, I've won some awards and things over 20 years. It's a long time. Over the last couple of years, I've really spent a lot of time sort of interacting with different stakeholders in this space being sort of the tension between generative AI tools and models and training and AI companies, and of course, all the human creatives that these models really affect, many times negatively. So yeah, all sorts of artists, illustrators, photographers, animators, authors, musicians, choreographers. The list goes on, and really quite a number of them. I would say thousands of them I've met in some capacity over the last couple of years. Lots of guilds. I've talked to lots of art colleges and faculty, so we can talk about the impact of AI and generative AI on the pipeline of aspiring artists and how many art colleges are closing and shrinking because of this disruptive impact. I've talked to museums and curators and their take on things, and I've testified in front of a couple state legislatures and helped draft at least one AI law that's been signed in Illinois regulating AI. And also help brief various agencies, everything from Copyright Office to FTC to NIST and so on. So for those who are not familiar, I always use sort of Kelly as a great example, just to really sort of push through this idea of what does it mean? What are the actual harms that generative AI are doing? And Kelly quite a while ago was really nice and gave me permission to use a bunch of her very personal artwork to sort of illustrate just what it's like to be an artist who's been affected in this way. So Kelly McKernan is a very successful artist who's independent. So I look at these photos of Kelly's earlier work, when she's literally like, in a small sundress drawing on sidewalk. But over the years, she's just, this is decades of work, decades of time and training and skill, honing her skill, and to the point where she's become a very successful independent artist, been in numerous art galleries and shows and so on. And one day she wakes up and she learns that quite a number of her paintings have been actually scraped into the Leon 5B database. And this was, I believe, back in the early days of generative AI, 2022, somewhere around early mid 2022. And then she learns that basically in models like Midjourney, you can basically use her name as a prompt. And she's not alone. In fact, Greg Rutowski and a fair number of other artists have discovered similar kind of things, how they've become basically prompts. And so here you can see lots of images that are being generated or that have been generated by these models that are meant to mimic the large image on the right. That's her original. And as you can see, they pretty much capture sort of really the stylistic effects of Kelly's painting in that, at least in that instance. So, Kelly's not alone. I know I'm reasonably short on time, so I don't want to sort of belabor the point, but there are really quite a number of artists who are being attacked in this way. And really, if you think about this, if you're an artist who's been, in the industry and really trying to make this a profession, it takes decades of training, of education, of practice, really quite the arduous struggle with not a lot of financial rewards. And at some point, if you're fortunate, you become successful. And one day, you discover that online somewhere, there are these repos of lightweight models that basically are you. They literally take your entire style, distill it down to a few bits that anyone can download for free. And for many of these artists who are captured like this, for all intents and purposes, their professional career is kind of over. If you can imagine, obviously the sort of the more discriminating customers might still want the real thing and not be satisfied with cheap mimicries. But now what happens is that anyone can take your name, they can take your style, and they can generate arbitrary images of whatever content, whether you object to them or not, without your knowledge, and perhaps gain and sell them, make a profit, all without your consent. So obviously this is incredibly disturbing and on a very personal level. So there's lots of negative impact on artists in every possible dimension that you can imagine, mentally, economically. You know, artists who've had, you know, long-running successful professional careers are all of a sudden find themselves basically, you know, out of a job, no incoming commissions or contracts because of things like this. As a result, you'll see many instances of people basically go on Twitter and saying, I'm quitting. I've been doing this for 20, 30 years. You know, some of these people are extremely well known and successful. And they're basically saying, yeah, this is it. I'm gonna go, I had to go find another job to support my family, to pay rent. And of course, you know, I didn't even get into the art colleges closing and just the tens of thousands, probably more, of aspiring artist students who are literally just quitting before they start because they see this happening and they say, my God, my, you know, role model of, you know, who's 30 years in the business is quitting. What am I doing to trying to go into this business? And obviously the mental sort of aspect of this is significant, and there's even worse outcomes from this. So this was sort of, you know, some of the I guess darker results, impact of this from circa 2022. And you know, so I was going to tell the story, but Carla's here. So you know, in sort of late in summer 2022, my group had already been doing a bunch of tools to protect human privacy, mostly in the space of facial recognition. And so that summer, we had some artists reach out to us and say, hey, can these kind of things protect artwork? We were very confused. We reached out after learning about generative AI just a teeny bit. And some of those artists invited us to join an online town hall hosted by the CAA and Carla. That's where I met Carla, and I really, you know, it's quite, when you hear about something and harms being inflicted on people, and then you see like literally hundreds of faces on a Zoom call talking about personal experiences, that really brings it home. So this is where Glaze comes in. After that meeting, I sort of, you know, sat with my students and we try to figure out how we can help, because we know something about this type of model training and we know how to break it. So this is what happens. So this image up here, which I oftentimes use, you know, actually a couple of Carla's paintings. She's always been so great to let us, you know, use some of her paintings as examples. So what you'll see is, you know, a couple of her paintings, original paintings on the left, and without protection, you can basically stick a few of them into a lightweight model fine-tuning process, and you can get lightweight models that generate the images on the right. So, you know, they're not exactly Carla, but you can see sort of they're even mimicking the sort of the postures and some of the strokes and sort of color palette is quite similar. So you can see how someone might mistake that as some of Carla's own work. So what you do then, what Glaze does is you apply Glaze to images of your art. And what Glaze does is it adds very small modifications that are barely visible to the human eye, or at least that's a goal. So here, I think you can actually see a little bit of graininess in the changes. And this is Glaze with one of the very original versions, so it's much more visible than today's version. But what it does is that it teaches the model, it teaches the model to see something dramatically different when it tries to extract what it thinks is style, artistic style, from the images. And so you'll see on the right side, those two images, basically this was an experiment way back when we made Carla's art look more like Van Gogh. And so you can see it's literally trying to replicate Van Gogh when you say, give me something in Carla Ortiz style. More examples here. You'll see, you know, Nathan is another artist friend who was kind enough to help us with samples. obviously Van Gogh and Monet. And you'll see without protection, you can generate pretty good mimics of the originals, stylistically and sort of, especially to, a non-artist eye. And then if you were to apply glaze protection to it, then the right two columns is what you get. Stylistically, something that looks really dramatically different. And hopefully that, really disrupts what the person was trying to do, right? You're trying to mimic a particular artist to replace them with this cheap model that you can go home and use wear like a skin. And this gives you something that you really don't want. And hopefully they just give up. So Glaze is now, as of a month or two ago, we're now in version 2.1. They're binary tools that we've released on Windows and Mac. To date, I think since we released it in March of last year, we've up to like 3.75 million downloads globally. There's lots of global artist groups from everywhere, from Argentina to UK to Sweden to Japan to Australia, who advocate for Glaze and the use of Glaze. And then we have a system called WebGlaze, where we run a web service for artists who don't have GPUs, so that they can basically use our own servers to glaze their artwork. Okay, I don't want to go too long over time. I'll briefly talk about Nightshade, which is perhaps even more disruptive than Glaze. And this is sort of a bigger problem in a way. It touches more stakeholders, namely companies. So here's Nintendo, and they have obviously characters that we all recognize. Turns out anyone with a generative AI model can now mimic Nintendo characters, obviously. That's not hard. There's so many images of them. But more importantly, they can do whatever they want with these images, right? So they can do mishmash of things together. Obviously, you don't expect, Mario Brothers character with a lightsaber and so on. But perhaps more importantly, you can make versions of them that you can then sell yourselves. In fact, there are companies now that actually do this, at least two companies that have their own versions of like Pokemon characters that they claim to be original, that are obviously generated via AI from some of Nintendo's own assets. So if you're a company, what do you do? And this is where Nightshade comes in. Nightshade is sort of like a sequel, if you will, to Glaze. It's meant to cover more. And the idea is similar in a way. Basically what you do is you take an image, and this can be anything. And this is not necessarily artistic style now. This is actually composition. So you take a photo, in this case of a dog, you can, Nightshade will apply a bunch of machine learning mathematical computations to it to generate what it thinks is the appropriate filter for a particular model. And when you apply that filter to the original image, it still looks like a dog to you, but really to the AI model, what it sees is something completely different. Right, it sees what we wanted to see. In this case, we wanted to see, basically cat whiskers and so on. Oops, sorry. So let me show you some more examples. So this is XCXL. This is a model that one of the more recent models from Stable Diffusion that was released, I think, in October of last year. It's quite good. You can see all the images up top. First row are basically images straight out of XCXL that you can get for different styles, different objects. And the bottom is a row of things that we want it to look like. Okay, so we're going to take all these clean images, we're going to poison them. So we're going to take a dog and make it look like a cat, a car look like a cow. And, even with a very small number of samples, like 50 samples, Carla's laughing, you'll see the impact on the model. So when you flip 50 poison samples into the training set, you'll see the image of the model that's been trained on it start to generate something that deviates significantly from the original. You've got a dog with, however many legs. The other things look kind of okay. 100 samples is where it starts to really look wonky. The dog looks more like a cat. The car looks more like a cow. The purse has funny things on it. And the hat looks more like a cake or a donut than a hat. And then finally, 300 samples, it's more or less full on whatever it is that you want it to be. Okay, so this is sort of the goal in the sense that basically, artists can sort of do this collective defense, if you will, together. So, different artists across the globe who have compositions that include, for example, dogs or a hat, can apply Nightshade, and as a group, all their images will have the same collective effect together on the same model. Okay, more fun things. So anyway, so this paper came out, when did this come out? This came out in May of this year. We released the software actually before then, January. It got like 250,000 downloads in 5 days. I think to date we're roughly about 1 million. I haven't checked the latest date numbers, but right about 1 million. So we've been talking to some companies about deploying this for IP protection, because now companies are now concerned about their own IP getting stolen by other companies. We actually have a model, we have a follow-up paper about this other effect that we first showed in the Nightshade paper, which is kind of fun. So let me show you something else. So first column, again, images that you get out of XCXL. And so what happens is, let's say a pristine model that's untouched by us, you ask for a person, a painting, a seashell, et cetera. Okay. Now what we do is we say, what happens if we attack and poison 100 concepts that are unrelated to what we asked for? So not a person, not a painting, not a seashell. And there's an interesting side effect, which is that when you get collective attacks on the model, that adds up. There's a cumulative effect on the model itself. In this case, basically what we call it model implosion. So after 100 attacks, which seems like a lot, but then you think about the hundreds of thousands of artists across the globe, and all the different subjects that they can actually paint and have photographs of. So 100 isn't that much. But once you have 100 concepts being affected by Nightshade, then everything in the model starts getting really, really affected. 250 and 500. And so very quickly now what you see is the model becomes, statistically speaking, very similar to a random pixel generator. And we have mathematical measures of this, that at a certain point, right around 200 concept attacks, that these large models that can encode hundreds of thousands of different concepts basically become gibberish machines. So we have actually a follow-up paper in November of this year, explaining theoretically actually what's going on in diffusion models and why this makes sense and why this is happening. So I'll wrap up. There's lots of follow-up by other people other than us. Since the Glaze paper first came out, I think Glaze was first of its kind in terms of turning an attack around to actually try to mitigate harms from generative AI. There's been multiple papers since then, working on human voice, working on music composition is an upcoming paper at CCS in November. There was a cool paper from Imperial College London that's like copyright traps for text. But basically, you put funny things, mathematically computed text characters in your text so that if it gets trained into a model, you can actually trace it. It's like taint analysis for generative AI text. But there are other projects that are coming down the road. I see a lot of people working on poison attacks on text, LLMs, but also protection from images generated from animation videos, protection for faces, and lots of other similar kinds of work. So yeah, that's all. I wanted to just give a high-level briefing. Hopefully I didn't take up too much.
No, thank you so much, Ben. It was a great explanation. Thank you for the updates. Thank you for your work. It's really wonderful. And we'll have questions after everyone speaks for a Q&A session where you can address everyone's questions after. But following Ben, Carla, you're up next.
So I have to be completely honest with everybody. I just found out I was going to be a part of this panel like about 2 hours ago. So in terms of slides and presentation, I don't feel like I have that much. But I think a lot of this kind of comes from, I'm like, wait, actually, I might have a little short presentation I could share. Yeah, dude. Oh shit. Okay, give me just a second. I'm not a very serious person. I hope everybody gets that across. Here was this share the screen. Here we go. Let's do it over here. So I think a lot of, one of the things that I hope to share with people is, what is the impact on the arts? I think like that's something that's often, missing in the conversation. And it makes sense. There's not a lot of folks, within the tech world that can say, oh, I am a working professional artist, and we see like how these things like affect community, because then you wouldn't be in tech, you'd be in the entertainment industry. So that's probably why there's that simple disconnect. But I feel like, there is a human element to all of this. And I want to kind of go very quickly on some of the issues that particularly my community hasn't experienced since 2022, and some of the issues that like the public in general does feel. Um, again, and a lot of, a lot of folks also don't quite, even in the tech industry, don't quite fully get like the extent of how invasive some of these models are. And it all started with, again, as Ben mentioned, like the collection of vast amounts of, image and text data pairs, to be gathered indiscriminately into large data sets for things like, for example, Stable Diffusion, Midjourney, and so on. That's through via Lion, 5B, but even more current models, like, for example, Datacomp, or any kind of LLM that's just like, oh, we use common crawlers. They basically all kind of scour the entire internet for whatever they can find. And that includes a lot of, copyrighted material, personal material, private material, and so on. And we'll discuss a little bit what that looks like. But the thing that feels so egregious, at least to me in our community, is that a lot of this was done under the guise of research, which by all purposes mean, yes, please gather as much as you want if it's for research. But then what happens is they just does a little twisty turn and said, oh, this research, these massive data sets that we used for research, we're now going to utilize to build for-profit models. There's a fantastic technologist called Andy Bio. He claims this, or he kind of titles this something called data laundering. And that's been a point of contention in our particular, industries, because for so many of us, we train our entire lives to be able to share what we do with the world. This is our livelihood. This is it. For me, this is more than just like copyright. For me, this is basically my identity and my livelihood all mixed into one. And then, to have that experience where it's like you're searching through the data sets and you're seeing, oh, there's like almost the entire body of my work. There's the entire body of like pretty much every single one of my peers, you know, and when you can see, oh, and people are using your names and so on. Like, for example, here we have one of our, and also, and by the way, important to know in full transparency, I am a part of a class action lawsuit. I am a plaintiff. We're currently suing Stable Diffusion, Midjourney, DeviantArt, and Runway ML. And I am one of the main plaintiffs alongside one of the other main plaintiffs, in Greg Rutkowski. For example, his name has been utilized since last we checked in December 2022. His name had been utilized 400,000 times. And that's just through very inadequate methods of searching it, basically through Discord. We do not know how many times his name has been utilized. My own personal name, Carla Ortiz, has been utilized over thousands of times by Midjourney alone. This is one simple model out of like how many models, visual models, are out there. And so imagine your entire livelihood, your entire body of work is taken for by companies to be utilized for profit, because every generation, every one of those names, every time they use our names to generate imagery, these companies profited for them. And then to add insult to injury, to then compete in our own markets. It's very egregious. It's very disrupting. And a lot of people say, but, like, hey, like it doesn't copy, but it does, and, this is another of the harms that it does. Like, these are all very early, samples. We have much better samples today. In fact, I highly recommend anybody to check Image Generator Litigation. That's the website of our class action lawsuit. It's particularly our November 29th amendment, which includes massive amounts of exhibits of our own personal work and how, they, compare to what is generated. But it copies tremendously, and people say, oh yeah, but Bloodborne, and that's an IP. But then it also copies, the work of artists as well. For example, this is a fantastic photograph called The Afghan Girl by photographer Stephen McCurry. And right on the side is a Midjourney generated imagery. It's like 1-to-1. And I do hesitate to quote studies in front of such esteemed university professors and scholars here. I'm like, but there is a certain high percentage that has been showcased where these models do plagiarize. It's you can see it, for example, in large language models. I believe Axios reported not too long ago that, for example, ChatGPT, all of their responses contain about 60% plagiarized content. And, I don't have the exact numbers of, image models right in front of me. I don't want to misquote it, but we see it at an enough consistent level to where it can provide a risk to anybody utilizing it at a commercial level. Because, you don't know, like these these data sets contain billions of images. I think the biggest one that I saw recently via Datacomp, 12 billion. And so how confident are you that what you're generating isn't someone else's copyrighted content, isn't someone else's IP, isn't someone else's livelihood? This is, oh, here we go. This is a very old one and very like generous, but at 1.88% is what they, and this was a very early study by the University of Maryland and the University of New York. But at that level, and I remember reading the actual like paper and them quoting all the different ways where they felt like that wasn't even a conservative estimate. They felt like that was even a lowered estimate. I'd be very curious to see if there's any recent research showcasing newer figures. But even that might seem small, but when you really take it into context on how many images are generated each day, each month, we're talking about millions. We're talking about massive amounts of generated imagery that is basically plagiarized 1-to-1, if not very close by. But generative AI also contains massive, privacy issues. A lot of, what is in those data sets is everything, and that includes medical records from people, that includes, non-consensual pornography, that includes, again, like hordes and hordes of artwork from people who just do not want to be a part of it, the works and livelihoods of people. I feel like in particular it's gotten even worse as well now with Meta. Recently the Australian government, they disclosed to the Australian government that they took pretty much if you're in Facebook, they took all your posts, all your pictures and everything from 2007, unless you like private, made it private. So I think the problem has increased even from when I made the slide. Another issue that we have going on as well is like due to machine learning's difficulty in forgetting upon, once the model has been trained, and I'm sure all the magnificent scholars and professors here can discuss this plenty. I am not the person to say that, but it does provide it is a point of contention because these models just cannot forget. So when I say, hey, listen, I don't want to be a part of this technology. I want my work to be mine. No company can remove my work successfully because just machine learning isn't a thing. But furthermore, there's a major problem here. Oh, and this is when it's like an impromptu slide fest over here gets in the way of my narrative. But another issue here when it comes to opt-out is that not only is opt-out wildly inefficient, because when you think about it, right, like, does that mean that an individual has to opt out every time there's an update to the model? Does that mean the individual has to opt out every time there, a new model comes out or a new like product comes in? Like, image generators alone, you have Midjourney, you have Flux, you have Stable Diffusion, you have Night Cafe, and so on. Do I have to be under schedule every time for me to say I do not want my work to be there? But on top of that, opting out is a travesty if you think about it, because it is a shift of the burden from the companies who should have, approach gaining data in an ethical manner completely onto, everyday people. And it poses so many burdens onto people. Basically, like, what happens if you don't know the technology? What happens if you don't know the language? What happens if you don't know that you're even a part of these models? It's quite concerning. So it's one of the reasons why in the artistic industries we promote opt-in as opposed to opt-out as a solution to so many of these woes. And again, in terms of, you know, copyright, that whole point is in contention. Again, right now, even in my own particular case, we just had a recent breakthrough or a recent development where the judge allowed us to continue on to discovery. So our claims were allowed to, you know, pass and make it to the next step. In particular, copyright infringement and trade dress violations. There's a lot that is in contention, but I think most people in government, maybe not most, maybe maybe key people in government are aware of the, you know, the ethical and, you know, potential legal liabilities that the training of these models, in which, you know, and again, what a model can generate solely depends upon its training, um enough for it to not, you know, to be hesitant to gain copyright. And again, you know, and this is an important point to think about too. This isn't just the art community saying, hey, this is an issue. Even these same models, the same makers of these models agree that without copyright, that they wouldn't have these models. Just recently, OpenAI CEO told the UK Parliament that these models would be virtually impossible to build or to function as they are without copyrighted material. And there is special consideration taken with the music industry. There's a particular model, Harmony, Dance Diffusion is a part of the Stability AI group. Harmony, when that came out in a blog post, they stated that they did not train their models with any kind of copyright infringe or copyrighted material due to the potential of, and I quote, overfitting and prone memorization of the models towards the data set. And so the artistic community, the visual community, the writing community, performers, and so on, they all ask themselves, but why was that consideration not given to us? It's one of the reasons why I am in the legal muck, as to say. And of course, you know, it's doing a lot of immediate harm, you know, and it already did. It's just the art industries have been, you know, I kind of call ourselves the canary in the coal mine. We have been experiencing an immediate reduction in our work. You know, ever since 2022, when the first reports of like, oh, this has expanded. Oh, look at that. This has expanded upon, you know, the capabilities expanded around like September-ish 2022, and immediately we heard reports of like, you know, students suddenly losing internships, you know, globally, you know, art teams suddenly, you know, being, you know, kicked out because they were going to be using generative AI. I myself have been, you know, I'm a freelancer, I charge by the hour. So I myself have been in various productions now where generative AI had been used, where it definitely cut into my hours as a freelancer. You know, there are unseen, another issue that we have as well is a lot of people in the arts are freelancers. We have a high percentage of our workforce is it freelance, and that's usually not counted in any particular study. So we have, you know, we have an almost like an unseen workforce that's being hit immediately. But I'll give you one quick example and then I'll pass the mic because I don't want to take too much of people's times here. But basically, you know, we have something called pitch work. Pitch work is when, you know, when things in the entertainment industry are slow, when something's going on. Pitch work is basically, you know, an artist, a director, and a producer or a writer, or any combination of that nature. They all get together and basically create pitches to deliver to the studios. Well, that's completely and utterly dead. I myself was a part of a project that was pitch work, you know. I was gung-ho to start working. That was going to be great because it was at the height of the strikes. That would have been amazing for me on my life. You know, I would have been able to make ends meet a little easier. However, as soon as I quoted them my price, they kind of skimped down, and they had their original pitch deck work was completely littered with generative AI. And, you know, later on, I went to a, you know, art conference, and people who had been doing pitch work for 20 years said, Carla is entirely dead. And it is. It's an entirely people aren't making a living on that anymore. And for some in the film industry, for some the arts in general, people who take commissions, people who rely on this stuff, these have been now the, hardest years of their careers. They're not generating money, they're not generating income. The harm is real, it's happening right now. And to add even further, I highly recommend people to check out this fantastic CVL economics study commissioned by the Concept Art Association, the Animation Guild, and so many other artist specific artist specific coalitions. And they found some really massive things. They found so many companies have already, implemented generative AI. A lot of them have already reduced or outright sometimes kicked out certain roles due to it. In particular, the one that is kind of, concerning is if promises of generative AI continue as the industries hope for, because anything could happen, literally. There's a potential to 62,000 entertainment jobs in California alone to be disrupted by 2026. About 203,000, 800 jobs, across all the United States. So this is huge. This is massive. And yeah, there's a lot of impact. There's a lot that can be done, which I'm sure we'll get to in the Q&A. And I do want to make sure I'm being mindful of time. So thank you.
Thank you, Carla. It was a wonderful presentation that you pulled together there.
Last minute, baby.
Thank you. Amazing. You did that in like 5 minutes. Okay, last but not least, audio. Please go. You're on mute.
Sorry, I'm just looking for that for my presentation here. Aha, there it is. I hope that's the right one. Okay, can you confirm that you can see my slides?
Yes.
Okay, just a moment. Aha, perfect. All right. So wonderful presentations before me, and so I'm going to take a slightly different approach to this, in the sense that Ben and Carla have been talking about sort of, I would say, the front of what we're talking about. So I'll kind of go behind the scenes and talk about how do we even get there, where we start having these models that we're talking about, which are so disruptive. And massive props to you both for this amazing work you're doing. So I'll explain later who we is. Are focusing on this project we're calling the Data Workers Inquiry Project, which is basically focused around recentering workers in the whole narrative around AI development. So we want to bring in focus these workers, these so-called ghost workers, etc., etc. So usually when I begin my presentations, I begin with this image, and I ask my audiences to say, when you look at these pictures, these 3 pictures, do they make you think of AI in any way? And I mean, responses can be different, but I will not belabor the point or stick to these pictures. I'll quickly move on and explain that this project that I'm talking about, the Data Workers Inquiry Project, is a project which encompasses 5 researchers, that is Milagros Micheli, myself, Crystal Kaufman, Camila, and Lawrence. So in this project, we are basically leading the project, but however, we work with what we call core researchers, who are basically data workers based in different countries, which I'll explain a little bit later, who are actually the actual experts in this work, because they are the ones who are doing the work. We are academics. We usually sit as academics in our ivory towers and pretend to know more about everyone else. But in our project, we are saying no. These data workers who are in the trenches are the ones who are experts of their own work. So we want to give them a voice to let them talk about it. So what you'll see in this presentation is mainly me trying to let you in on what the workers themselves are saying, not so much my opinions. So what that means is when these workers are being the experts of their own work, it also means that they're also responsible for the output. So in our project, we've had different forms of output. We've had zines, podcasts, vlogs, blogs, reports, because the workers themselves are the ones who know best how to express themselves, not us. Because if you give it to us, we'll write journal articles, and the whole academic shindig. So on your screen right there are the different workers that we have engaged in this project, and so from pretty much all over the world. And these workers work in different places. So we have people from Syria, refugees from Lebanon who are living and working in Syria. And I'll explain later why this is important, or what issues arise because of this particular positionality of these workers. So again, I will not spend much time on methodology, because I want to sort of get into the not the real issues. Because if I say real issues, it sounds as if methodology is not real. No, but I want to get to the issues of what the workers are saying. So our project is basically premised around Mark's workers inquiry method, which is where he sent about 100 questionnaires to workers and asked them to describe their own working environment. So we adopted this, or adapted this to the current scenario. So I think before I go further, there's a word which I've already said a couple of times, the term data work. I think I've said it a number of times. So I will try to define it. So my colleague Milagros Micheli and Julian Posada have already defined this term. So when we hear the term crowd work, crowdsourcing, micro work, ghost working, this is what we are calling data work. What does this mean? This is basically a term that is used to describe the labor that goes into producing data to train and refine machine learning systems. So when you're talking of data work, this is what we're talking about. So putting it simply, we're talking of your data annotators, data cleaners, your content moderators, the people who work behind the scenes. So what you will realize about these people is that they are often hidden. Their work is often defined as illiterate, as low-skilled, and the machine learning practitioners are the ones who are glorified. They are the whiz, they are the brilliant people from Silicon Valley. And these workers that we're talking about, the ones we're focusing on, the ones which we believe are essential to the development of these systems, are not mentioned. Why? Because they are trapped in some warehouse in Venezuela. They're trapped in some warehouse in Nairobi, Kenya, in Uganda, in the Philippines, in India, in these different places. And it works for the tech bros to keep these workers hidden, because once everything is hidden, then, they're fair game. Who knows what's happening to them there? What are they going to say? So this is what we're trying in this project to say, no, we need them to come out. So in our conversation with these workers, a couple of things have come to the surface, a couple of grievances that they have raised. The first one that I'm going to focus on is issues of vulnerability and dependency. So when we talk to these workers, many of them have expressed different forms of vulnerability. What does it mean? So many of them are usually in very, I would say, tricky positions financially, socially. I'm talking of refugees living in refugees from Syria living in Lebanon. They are not allowed to do other forms of work. And the only work they can do is what? Data work. And they are annotating 10,000 pictures. And you know how much they get paid for 10,000? Sorry, for all these pictures, they get paid 144 euros for 10,000 pictures. Now, I don't care what annotation means. Even if it's just clicking next, 10,000 pictures cannot get someone 144 bucks. So most of these workers, before they start this job, they were so hopeful. They were thinking that once I get into tech, then my life changes. But is this what happened? Not really. And who are these workers we're talking about? I explained some of them come from your shanty towns. If you have time, Google Kibera, Kibera, one of the biggest slums in Africa. This is where most of these workers come from. And mind you, it's not accidental that they come from those places. is deliberate. Because if you're desperate, then you are willing to accept.
Reminder to mute your mics, please. Mute, please. Thank you.
So one of our core researchers is an immigrant from Iran living in Germany. So just in case you thought this exploitation of workers was happening in the global majority, no, this is also happening in the so-called global north, so-called developed countries. Why is this happening? Because it's happening not necessarily because of location, but because of your positionality. Who are you? You're a refugee, which means more or less you rely on this job for your visa. So you have to work, because if your survival or your residence in this country is tied to this job, and when you get in, as one co-researcher explained from Lebanon, that as a refugee from Syria, you're not allowed to work in many sectors. There are a very limited number of sectors you are allowed to work, and conveniently it so happens that data work is one of them. The same thing is happening in Germany. The same thing was happening in Nairobi, Kenya, where people are running away from the war in Ethiopia, in Tigray. The only job they could find was as quoted moderators. And you know what they were moderating? The exact war they'd run away from. So you can imagine the amount of pain that goes on to this. So these workers often feel trapped. And so imagine you are running away from a war where your people are being killed and you have no access to your people at all. There's no internet, it has been shut down. You have no idea what's happening. And the only connection you have to what's happening is as you sift through data during your work, moderating content. One person I spoke with in Nairobi, Kenya, told me that during one of their normal working days, of course, there's nothing normal about this work, they came across the body of their cousin, you know, because they are the ones who get to see this gruesome content before we get to see it. So he came across the body of his cousin. He had no idea what was happening. Next thing you see your cousin dead. And how do you handle this? So apart from this vulnerability and this, I would say, yeah, I don't even know how to properly describe this. There's also the issue of uncertainty, because you have no idea what's happening. You have no idea where the next gig is coming from. And I often hear people talking about how, you know, the future of work with AI, how it's making life easier. But is it really making life easier when what we are doing is we are destroying existing long-term secure jobs and replacing them with these little mini gigs where you have no idea where it's coming from? So when someone then speaks of AI, you know, being the game changer, indeed it's a game changer, but for the worse, not for the better, as they would want to sell us. So when we talk of this uncertainty, this idea of not knowing where your next meal is coming from, this is a reality which the core researchers we spoke with are faced with. So as I promised that I will let the core researchers themselves do a lot of talking.
No existe un día típico en estas plataformas, ya que no existen horarios. Algunos los asumimos, otros nos caen por sorpresa. No sabemos el día ni la hora en que se comenzará a trabajar, o si es que ese día saldrá algún trabajo. No existen garantías de esto.
I hope you managed to read that. We kind of sped it up because we're being mindful of time. I think I have about 70 more slides to go, so I need to be mindful of time. So when we speak of this uncertainty, this whole idea that you have no idea what's going to happen, this is a reality for most of these workers. Because what can happen, for example, with my conversation with some workers in Kenya, they told me that one day you can just be told, after you go to work at 8, and then at 10, the team leader comes and says, oh, sorry, you have to go home now because the client has pulled out of the project you're working on. So your job is over, bye-bye. Just like that. And you have to go because immediately you'll be escorted out. So another issue that is also a reason from our research is the issue of wage theft. This is exactly what we're calling it, because this is, so again, I'll let a core researcher we worked with explain what they mean by this whole idea of wage theft.
The compensation is always subject to change at the end of the project. The company holds the power to reject a batch of work. even after we've poured our time and effort into completing it. This could end up costing us money instead of helping us earn it.
So imagine you have been given a task, poorly explained. You do this task over 6, 7, 8 hours of work. At the end, you are told, oh, sorry, it's not really what we're looking for. Can you redo it? Who is going to pay you for those hours of work? No one. So essentially what's happening there is that's theft. Essentially, you are working for free. And now imagine this scenario where you work, you do this work diligently and you deliver, and you're paid using gift cards. Yes, Amazon gift cards. That's how you're paid. You know, imagine after doing this work. And then now what that means is how, this is a form of wage theft in so many messed up ways. Because if you are paid with the gift cards, the question is, can you pay rent with gift cards? That essentially means you now have another second job of trying to find someone who has money, who happens to need to buy something on Amazon, and who wants to exchange their money for your gift cards. So now imagine the amount of work that goes in after you have delivered work. And again, Amazon is not, it's capitalism. So what does this mean? We pay using Amazon gift cards. And where can they be spent? On Amazon. So another issue again, which we also unearthed, was the issue of mental health. I think I already spoke earlier about people running away from a war in Tigray, where their people are being slaughtered. And then you are made to work as a content moderator for the exact war that you're running away from. Now, this is not all. Imagine being made to watch disturbing content. And by disturbing, I mean, think of the most depraved thing human beings can do and multiply that by 10. This is what these people get to see each and every day of their work, 9 hours. So one co-researcher described how this amount of stress coming from this work was so severe that they literally got physically sick because of what they had to see. And I think this co-researcher accurately captures what exactly they go through.
So the effects were across the board. Everyone who worked on the project experienced this kind of mental challenges, especially sexual content can really affect someone's emotions and how you think and how you see people. Hearing the fact that you are reading text about rape, violently raping people and some people are being killed, it hit me so much as a person, as an individual, because after working on this text and my behavior started changing, and by that time I was married to a young beautiful lady. And then when my behavior started changing and screaming at night, waking up, not sleeping, she started questioning my behavior. But with our Kenyan culture, you can't just explain to someone that you are working on sexual content. They might think that you are doing something illegal. So I kept this to myself, and my wife could not cope up with my changing behavior, and she decided to go.
Now, imagine the insidiousness of this kind of work, how it gets to the real core of who you are as a person. So there's a video which, if you go on our website, Data Workers Inquiry website, you'll see which we kind of cut from this particular presentation, where one young man describes how his wife left because he was now unable to perform his conjugal duties in the bedroom because of the content that he was seeing every day. So imagine another very insidious thing that happens, that when you are being trained, recruited to do this job, you are told you'll be seeing videos of cats dancing and doing tricks. And you get into the work and bam, it's a beheading that you have to be viewing. But when you are recruited, you're going to be looking at what? Cats. I mean, we all have, I think at least most of us love cats. I think there are a bunch of cat ladies out there. And we definitely are not eating any cats or any pets. So when these people are doing this work, they sign up to do work which they think is easy, which they are told is easy, but this is what they get to go through. So I can go on and on and on in describing this kind of issues, but I think maybe let me skip for now, talking about this and talk about what else can be done. So the workers that we spoke about are not just sitting on their laurels and complaining and mourning about the hardships they are going through. They've started organizing, trying to see how they can take back the power, take back their agency. So one of the things they're doing, as one co-researcher from Colombia explains,
Por eso estoy en grupo de WhatsApp con personas que trabajamos casi las mismas plataformas. No nos conocemos en persona, pero sí tenemos muchos años platicando y ayudándonos mutuamente. Cuando sale una tarea nos avisamos, nos despertamos y trabajamos cada quien con su respectiva cuenta. Los trabajos son individuales, pero suelen ser semejantes. A veces salen nuevos, con nuevas instrucciones, nuevo cliente. Eso requiere tener una óptima calidad de respuestas, por lo que nos apoyamos. Nuestra finalidad es conseguir una aprobación del 100% de las respuestas y así poder seguir trabajando. Este grupo donde estoy también me sirve como red de soporte emocional, algo crucial en un campo donde la incertidumbre es la norma.
So there is power in solidarity, and that is one of the different ways that they are doing it. And there's one of, I think one of our most proudest moments was in Nairobi, where through a mutual aid fund, we managed to help people trapped in Nairobi, because after they raised issues with their ill treatment, Meta, who was the main employer, decided to pull the plug on them and fired all of them, and they were trapped in this country in Kenya. Some of them had their passport confiscated by landlords because they could no longer afford to pay rentals. And these were people who had been recruited from different countries. So one of the projects that we did was get a mutual aid fund where we managed to help some people to go back home. Then also, again, unionizing, as always. I think as our project is premised upon Marx's ideas, we believe that workers of the world should indeed unite.
It's during that time that we decided to have a gathering, and that gathering happened on the 1st of May 2023. And then it's in that gathering that we had a discussion as content moderators and decided to come up with the union to have a collective bargaining. And it's also during that meeting that we decided to name our union to be called African Content Moderators Union, because it's an African affair.
So again, one of the things that we can also do in addition to this is the issue of public awareness. What we are doing right now, talking about this, because this kind of exploitation happens because it's in the dark. So the best way, if there is a ghost in your house, put on the lights. So we have seen campaigns like the Me Too movement, Surviving R. Kelly, and SARS Nigeria. We have seen how movements like this have garnered attention and change and or possible prosecution. So perhaps maybe there should be a content moderators, surviving content moderation, surviving data work, surviving AI art theft movement, which can drive attention of the public and perhaps reap rewards. And also whistleblowing platforms. Because the whole issue, again, like I said, is because this happens in the dark. So maybe perhaps if there can be collaborative documentation of the experience that workers are going through. Because one of the things that we have discovered during our research is that some of these companies will go in one country. When the people or the authorities of that country raise issues, they move to the next country. So which means there is need for a more collaborative or a more global outlook as far as this issue is concerned. And also issues of skill sharing and training, because sometimes workers lose tons of hours because they are poorly trained. So perhaps through mutual sharing of skills, they can be training not only on doing the work, but also on how to take back agency, how to fight back. So I think as I conclude, the question is, why should we care? Okay, we've heard all of this, but why should we care? We should care because everyone is a data worker. As one of my colleagues at Dare, Adrian Williams, explains, that we are what are called zombie trainers, because every time when you are identifying which crosswalk, which one is a crosswalk and which one is a river, you are training AI. And Adrian calls this a zombie trainer because you have no idea what you're doing, you know, just like a zombie, clicking away and going forward. And when we do this work where we are reporting all of this, what is that? It's AI training. And I think I won't go into this because Carla has already spoken about this in greater detail. And therefore, I will not repeat this. So essentially, all of us, we are at risk And not, I'm not talking of imaginary, futuristic, Terminator, Skynet, robot comes from the future kind of risk. I mean actual a risk that is happening now. Carl already explained this risk of how livelihoods are being upended. And in our research, we've also examined how many people who are doing this work that powers these systems are being exploited. So our aim for our project is literally to establish the truth. Dear colleagues, I thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Adio. Thank you so much. That was so powerful. The stories were wonderful that you shared. I think it's a great reminder that, you know, we have solidarity with workers all around the world, regardless of their working conditions, regardless of the level they're at. And frankly, capitalists will ruthlessly exploit whoever they can. And it's important to unite in solidarity with everyone against that. So thank you, everyone, for the presentations, Carla, Ben, Adio. It's been so wonderful. Thank you all again for joining us, for speaking. Does anyone in chat have any questions for our speakers before we go? Any comments? Anything you'd like to share?
I'll just share one image that I think also adds a little bit to what Adio already spoke of. And this is some stuff that I did just a teeny bit of research on a while ago, right? Basically, a bunch of these sort of magical AI systems are just crowdsourced to you know, developing regions and getting people to do the labor and pretending like a genius AI when in fact it's just people being exploited and you know, with the AI skin. So stop that now.
What I would like to share and what was missing from my own presentation, but Adio so perfectly kind of encapsulated in his own, is there is so much worker movement, and this is globally. It used to feel like it was the entertainment, you know, just the artists for so long, but it never really was. It was coders, it was data workers, and like I remember one of the first articles that I saw was actually of that person that you were quoted, who, you know, in your own presentation, Adio, that, you know, I think the Atlantic had that big reveal of that. But also, like, most recently, for example, in California, there was a hearing, it was like a privacy and labor hearing concerning you know, generative AI and just AI in general and how it is affecting labor all over. And it's really impressive because now it's really spreading to hospitals, like nurses being forced to be you know, to utilize, you know, faulty generative AI that isn't 100% there. You know, educators being forced to be utilizing this as a way to, you know, teach and essentially replace them. And what has worked really well in the artistic industries is, one, realizing how much power we actually have as individuals, but how even more powerful we are together. And I know it sounds very cheesy to say, but I have seen personally groups of artists unite throughout the globe, you know, whether it be Europe, whether it be, you know, Latam, whether it be Brazil, whether it be Japan. It just doesn't matter. People raising up a stink and saying, hey, this is not okay. This level of exploitation is not okay. People you know, unionizing at record levels in the entertainment industries and games and animation studios and BFX and saying, this is going to be our stand. Right now, video game workers, in particular voice actors, are striking against many game companies because of this particular thing, because I think we're all very well aware that, again, not only does this, you know, hurt our privacy, hurt our work, hurt our ability to exist on the internet, but also hurts potentially our livelihoods in many ways that, you know, some feel immediate and some will probably feel in the near future. And I think it's, you know, gaining that solidarity and taking action both for you know, your own livelihoods, but for each other is very important. Becoming politically active is so huge. It's been one of the biggest things that our artistic group has done. To be in the halls, and tell the legislators here, like, you hear the money telling you this is going to enhance creativity. Let me tell you about creativity. Let me tell you about what it's like to make your own work. Let me tell you about what it's like to be an artist. Let me tell you what it's like to be a freelancer and not know where your money's coming from, and suddenly having to compete with a machine that does not sleep, does not eat, does not need to pay bills. No human in the world can compete, but it's also built on your work, and it changes people. And I think to, become each other's best advocate is, one of the best things we can do. So, yeah. That's all I got to say.
Thank you, Carla. Thank you so much. Let's see. Brian has a question. Is anyone thinking of protection for artists beyond IP law? In the short term, they have to use it, but IP law has always primarily been for censorship and securing publishing monopoly. So artists using IP law strengthen a system that exploits them.
So I'm happy to kind of chat. I think there's a disconnect in the tech industry about, what copyright is and what isn't, what IP is and isn't. And I think that I've heard one of my favorite things that I've heard throughout is always like, "Oh, Carla, you're actually doing Disney's work." But one of the things I will point out is to look at the MPA, that's the Motion Picture Association, their submission to the Copyright Office. And one of the things that they're just salivating on is, being able to copyright generative imagery, generative media, because then, that's literally one of the few things that is allowing artists to maintain a living, is that these things can't be copyrighted. When it comes to copyright, however many people might feel about, copyright, at the end of the day, it's one of the few legal systems that creatives have in order to protect their work. That it's abused, yes, absolutely. But that's why I often promote, instead of saying, hey, this is, artists fighting. No, I want people to help us fight for copyright reform. To, for example, like in parts of the EU, right? Copyright is immediately granted to its creators. So artists don't have to, file expensive, copyright filings in order to protect their work. Artists can vindicate their rights immediately without having to go through that expensive filing. Another issue that a lot of people forget and don't really understand very well is one of the major issues, the really thing that screws over creators over and over, isn't necessarily that companies, have abused copyright, is that companies have abused, how many rights we give them whenever we work for them. And that's in the terms of work for hire. Work for hires are contracts that the majority of artists, almost every writer, almost every creator in the United States has to, in order to be able to make a living out of this, we basically give them our entire rights. So, for example, in other parts of Europe, an artist won't give away their rights to, like, let's say it doesn't matter if you work on, like, I'll give an example. For example, the creator Kristen Alsman of, Baby Yoda and BB-8, like, he works for Disney. If this was in the EU or certain parts of the EU, he would still retain the rights to those characters because they came from him. And he would have some sort of royalty. He would have, and the companies would negotiate with him to find something that's fair and equitable. Because it's in the United States, however, and he signed a, work for hire, he will never see a cent of any of the merchandise or any of the profits from those characters, even though he is the creator of it.
Could you go over that last part again about the right to the work in Europe?
So and this is something that I found out as I discussed with other folks throughout, the globe. Work for hires is a concept that's uniquely, well, at least to my knowledge, and again, I'm not a lawyer, so please always double check with a lawyer. Work for hire is something that, it doesn't really exist in other countries, like, for example, in the EU, because artists do still retain part of their rights. the copyrights are given to the artist immediately. And just because you work at a company does not mean that that company retains all the rights. There are some exclusive rights that the artist still maintains. And that's huge. That's like life-changing. So when people are like, oh, like copyrights are being used, to hurt creators, the really point of contention, at least from the creative industry, if you ask a creative professional, what is the thing that really hurts us more so than anything, is actually work for hire contracts, and those need to be reformed. And the copyright industry, the Copyright Office knows they need to be reformed. So, when I hear like, oh, copyright IP, it actually hurts creatives. No, it doesn't. It doesn't. It needs to be reformed so that we don't get the typical corporate, things. And, for example, trademark need massive reforms so that we don't get, like, for example, like big pharma suddenly saying, hey, this vaccine is ours forever, and they charge over, like, things like these need to be reformed. But when we say outright demolish the system, it's the only system that allows artists to vindicate their rights. It's the only system that allows us to be able to have even a fighting chance against companies. So yeah, I think it's one of those things where it's like, I really do urge everybody to be like, okay, take a step back and actually like check out, like, what does a reformed copyright system look like in a way that better assist people, better assist the public in general, artists, creatives, and everybody, doesn't and isn't right for corporate, kind of, abuses. And also, please, for the love of God, help us in fighting, for work for hire reforms. Those are killing us. So I don't know if that answered your question very well, but I hope it did.
All right,
Yeah.
looks like it did.
Thank you.
Are there any final questions? I know we're we're way over time.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you everyone for joining. This is the final series in the AI panel series. Thank you for joining us. And of course, I will throw in the TWC subscribe link down here. You can join the Slack. You can sign up for our newsletters if you want to get more involved with tech activism. But thank you again, everyone. Ben, Carla, Audio. It's been so wonderful talking to you, hearing your voices. Thank you so much for your valuable time. And I hope we can collaborate again soon. Thank you, everyone.
Thank
Have
you
a
for
good
having
night.
us. Take care, y'all.
All right, bye.
Bye.
Good night, everyone.